Airbnb has been getting a lot of bad press in recent years, with claims that it's fueling the UK housing crisis by turning long-term rentals into short-term holiday lets. Rachel Blake even said that thousands of homes in central London have been lost to Airbnb. Now, is there any truth to this, or is this all being blown out of proportion? In this video, we're going to dive into a new report that exposes the truth about Airbnb's impact in the UK housing market. But we'll also be looking at the future of Airbnb and short-term rental when it comes to buy-to-let properties. Stay tuned. So to put things into perspective as to why some landlords are switching from long-term rentals to short-term holiday homes, let me share with you a typical story of Steve, a long-time landlord. He found himself in a financial challenging situation after Section 24 was introduced. It was phased in between 2017 to 2020, and this combined with the rise of mortgage rates, increased operational costs, which a lot had to do with the increased regulations, by the way. Steve found himself not being able to make ends meet. And this even despite with the increase of 33% of rental that we saw across the country in recent years. So Steve found himself with a situation whereby he had to explore other options, and one of these options did include short-term holiday lets, which he found had a lot of demand and paid very well. Let me give you a brief breakdown. On a long-term rental for this property in central London, a two-bedroom property, he was earning around about just below £40,000, and yet even paying the agent for the rental but also for the management, found himself with around about just over £30,000 in his pocket. Now let's compare this with the short-term rental. It was around about £80,000, and even taking into consideration the portal fees and agent fees, still found himself £20,000 plus better off in his pocket. It was enough to be able to cover the mortgage rates, which had almost tripled. If you're a landlord not sure whether short-term rental is right for you, make sure you book an appointment directly with me. The link is on the description. Steve's story is in no way unique. A recent House of Commons report reveals that there's been a major increase in short-term rentals across the UK over the course of around about 5 years. So platforms like Airbnb and Booking.com now featuring over 450,000 short-term rentals as of 2024, a 30% increase since 2019. And we can see this: England 370,000, London 82,000, Southwest 80,000 and the Northwest 39, with Yorkshire having 29,000 properties, a 57% rise. Scotland, however, saw a 6% decline due to stricter regulations. Now, despite the surge in listings, the real question is, what is the true impact on housing supply? Contrary to claims that Airbnb is somehow squeezing out the long-term rental stock from the rental property market, what we have is a recent report, EY, showing that actually the rental property, the short-term rental property, only represents a very tiny fraction of properties when compared to the whole of the UK supply. Entire homes listed on Airbnb represents just 0.7% of the total dwellings, and even those hosts only put their property up for around about 3 days of the entire month. Even those more intensive hosts, so those who rent out for 90 nights or more, only account for 0.17% of the entire housing stock in the UK. If you're finding this video helpful, make sure you hit that like button. It really does motivate me in shooting more of these videos for you. Whilst the number of short-term lets in the UK is relatively small, the impact in the UK economy is substantial. In fact, Airbnb claims that their contribution to income at least is 5.7 billion to the economy. This boost isn't just happening in London, this is benefiting places that wouldn't normally benefit from tourism. As an example, in London, Airbnb contributed 1.5 billion and supported over 16,000 jobs. And this is just not in hotspots in Westminster, but in places like Hackney and Waltham Forest. So for those who might see Airbnb as competition, it's worth noting that economic benefits of Airbnb related travel estimated at £17 per month per household far outweigh any potential negative effects on housing affordability, which come in at just £8 per month. Rachel Blake's claim that thousands of homes have been lost to Airbnb in central London sounds alarming, but the report tells us a different story. That hosts really just rent out one property, and even at that, only for a few days over the course of a month. In fact, 2/3 of local authorities' entire homes listed on Airbnb make up 0.5% of the total dwellings. Only 25 or 318 local authorities had more than 2% of Airbnb properties listed on their portal. So this idea that Airbnb is somehow swallowing the supply of properties, it just doesn't add up. And in places like in York and Wales, Airbnb has actually improved the rental affordability. How? Well, by boosting local income, but also making better use of available properties. The findings on the EY report makes it clear that the impact of Airbnb on housing affordability is minimal. I mean, it's marginal at best. In fact, the short-term rental on Airbnb only represents 0.6% of rental payments, and in fact, just over 1% of the total house prices of 2022. Despite calls for stricter regulations, the EY report suggests that restricting Airbnb isn't going to solve the UK housing crisis. In fact, the problem, or the real problem, is the lack of supply, especially when it comes to new homes. Now, restricting short lets is probably going to impact the economy and not really make housing more affordable. The real solution lies in increasing the supply of homes, specifically affordable homes, where their demand is growing more than ever. If you're a landlord or a tenant watching this video, leave me a comment below. I'm always interested to know your views. The idea that Airbnb is somehow the culprit behind the UK rental crisis is just not true. And policymakers should focus more on building more homes, because the biggest challenges for renters, at least, is going to be inflation, the lack of supply of properties. Nevertheless, what can landlords in the short-term rental market expect for the future? Well, number one, you can definitely expect that regulations are going to continue to increase. And of course, that's going to impact your pocket. Second thing is that there is going to be more competition. There is some good news, however, when it comes to mortgage and lenders, they are going to be offering more packages. One thing to note is, going back to competition, you're going to have to make sure that your properties looks amazing, because you don't only have private landlords entering the market, not in this big way where the media tells you, but there's definitely more competition, but you also got corporate companies. And for those who are in the long let, one thing to be careful again is, of course, those corporate companies as well enter into the long let as well. Build to rent is the next one to watch.